My name is the story I'm about to tell you. Freya is difficult for me to acknowledge, but it caused me to reflect deeply on feelings, accountability, and the thin, my husband's line between right and wrong. Early the morning, George had departed on a business trip to Los Angeles for the weekend. We resided in a modest beachfront home in California with huge windows that flooded the room with natural light, and the all day long, the tranquil murmur of breaking waves. George liked his job for a long time, and I always backed him despite his frequent trips, felt more empty when they left the house. Every time I chose to take advantage of the silence. Morning by tidying up the house and rearranging the area, I placed on my preferred jazz playlist and began in the music in the living room from the soft music from speakers, created a serene, airy ambiance that flawlessly melded in order to enjoy the cool beach breeze. I wore a basic white t-shirt and some jeans shorts to allow for comfortable mobility as I concentrated on dusting the tall bookcases. Where George stored some of his most treasured decorations, I suddenly had the unique sensing that there was a person behind. I spun around and noticed Liam George's, his former spouse's son, is leaning up against the door frame. Liam had just emerged from his chamber. His eyes were still carrying, and his hair was untidy. Sleep residue. "Good morning, Liam," I said, smiled as she welcomed him, attempting to maintain. He said, "Morning," in a cheery tone, even though he looked a little longer. He entered the living world more than normal. Space and took a seat on the couch. His eyes kept pursuing me. I attempted to avoid payment. Too much attention, so I kept working. However, I found it more difficult because of him. To focus. We began chit-chatting about his plans for his internship and the projects he planned working on. But when I approached on the upper shelf, reposition a picture frame, I was unaware that I felt shaky on. I was standing on a little stool that swayed a little to one side, and I lost my footing and Liam yelled, "Freya!" He hurried over to me and wrapped his arms wrapped around my waist just before I could collapse in the peaceful space I sensed. Liam's steady hold held us in place. My breath was frozen for a few seconds. As our eyes locked, it became lodged in my chest. I felt the closer than ever before. Liam's grip was firm, but there was moreover a tenderness as though he was terrified of shocking me by making my heart race when I recognized that we were sufficiently close, that I could sense his warmth breathing. I laughed a little to release the tension. The tight hush. "Lucky you were, I might have had a bad fall here." Liam didn't react correctly when it was mentioned casually. Gone, his gaze remained fixed on me as though he was unable to articulate what he wanted to say. Find the bravery. His eyes were a blend of perplexity, interest, and something similar appreciation. I released him from his grip and repositioned my t-shirt in an attempt to get my Liam maintained his poise as he stood there, with my eyes fixed on him. I turned to him and spoke in a tone that I hoped was informal. "Are you planning anything this weekend?" Liam shrugged, and a small smile appeared on his expression. "I'll probably just remain at home and unwind." I nodded and approached the couch and gestured for I needed a minute to get him to sit with me. After almost collapsing, Liam sat down and calmed down as well, and all of a sudden the gap between we felt smaller than we had ever been. Our quiet wasn't uncomfortable, was calm but cozy, with the sound of outside. The waves drifted in with by the rays of golden sunlight shining through. I looked at Liam and the big window, that he was still observing me in that steady, serene look, but there's something gentle and distinct about it. Something, to be honest, I've always enjoyed mornings. I murmured this softly, interrupting the quiet. Calm and leisurely, Liam nodded, and his voice was quieter than mine. Particularly when there is someone with whom to share his tone, caused me to pause as he spoke. Didn't sound as like he was discussing. I felt the beat of my heart. Something simple. Speed up Freya at times. It seems like we may understand one another without having to words, he muttered, his eyes unmoving, latched into mine, and I sensed the temperature rising. I shouldn't be feeling this way, but Liam's expression on my face made everything feels unthinking and fuzzy. I reached out and brushed his arm softly, just a little bit. Seems to freeze the air between us. All that was present was our breathing and a sensation that could not be described. I mumbled, uncertain, Liam, but I couldn't take my eyes off Liam. Anything. But instead, he carefully positioned his give it to me, holding it as though to comfort me at that very moment when I realized we were on the brink of something much larger than merely a brief intimacy. But before I could consider any, I noticed that he was leaning closer, that I was not retreating in the midst of his warm breath, and the dawn sun felt as though the outer world had Liam leaned in, totally gone. Closer, and I was unable to prevent myself from leaning in carefully at that time, as well seemed to go on indefinitely, as the gap between us vanished. Breath lightly touched my cheek. I closed my heart, feeling cozy and incredibly close. Eyes as if each sound had vanished from our surroundings, as his lips touched me tenderly, but passionately. That kiss made my whole body tremble. Wasn't hurried. It was kind, like though we were both aware that we were crossing a final boundary one. We were unable to get back from my heart hammered in my chest as if it wanted to. I knew this was wrong, so I broke free. I knew that this was wrong of me, yet I didn't have a compelling argument at the time, enough to withstand Liam's warmth. His hand moved lightly over my cheek, drawing me in as though he was worried that might vanish. I sensed the power, and his heart's quick beat mirrored mine. I reached up and touched his entire shoulder, sensing his solid physique, and his breath caught in his throat as he murmured his voice made the name Freya sound. I put my head against his and shivered, feeling his arms firmly wrapped around his torso but gently around me, as though he desired to protect me from everything that's not. We had made this planet for his breath, mingled his encompassing warmth with mine. Us in the room's soft light, I delicately touched his fingers with mine. Cheeks sensing his skin's warmth below my Liam wrapped his arms around me tightly. A bit more, his eyes gleaming with genuineness and desire that was. It's indisputable that we both understood the line had been passed, and there were no more. Liam dropped his head to defend us and gave me another deeper kiss. His kisses were more intense, making every wall I constructed collapsed, so I ran feeling my fingers through his hair. Hands shake with the strain of feelings I was unable to control beyond. The waves carried on with their rhythmic music that makes me think about the world that persisted, although at that time for me, there was only his breath, his heartbeat, and a sense of intimacy that as though we had been each other's property for so, I told myself to quit for a long time, but my heart refused to listen. Yet I could feel his warmth whisper close to my ear, his voice quiet, and I'm shaking and unsure of what to do, Freya. I keep thinking about you all the time. I gave him a little pat on the cheek, and in his I noticed that we were both carried away by the gaze. In this silent, overwhelming feeling, we had overcome that delicious temptation, the delicate line giving me a sensation of terror and ferocity as though in his arms I had totally lost myself. I nearly got lost in the confusion between reality and intense feelings. The Liam's body's warmth and the sound of I can feel his heartbeat beating through me made my reasoning even more hazy with each touch. His was soft, yet blazing I sensed a creeping heat that I couldn't put out. His mouth slides down my temple to my cheek, where little sweat drops are located, glistening evidence of the internal conflict. My entire body shook inside of me, but not out, of fear, but due of a genuine desire, and prohibited his fingers from slipping into my hair, running softly through it, as though making an effort to console and bring me even. I lost myself in his eyes as they grew closer, of a youthful individual who is full of desire and genuineness that seemed nearly harsh in its sincerity. Freya's voice broke as he inhaled, filled with desire and begging for me not to turn away, because I was unsure about what the choice I made at that precise moment. I had the impression that I was drifting down, a raging river that cannot be stopped. I was compelled by my heart to react regardless of the implications. I could hear his voice sound like you're trying. I could feel his breath close to my neck, constant heartbeat in his chest, making it all seem like a dream. But a faint voice whispered at the back of my head, even when I said, "You've crossed the line." Unable to stop myself, Liam dragged me closer to his warmth, enveloping me like a blanket of protection, making me forget about everything else. Past this instant, I never imagined this might occur, Liam muttered, his eyes shining with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty, considering that I hadn't shoved him away. But I don't want to lose this sensation or you. His remarks pierced like arrows. I knew I should take a step back, but his breath was still in my hands, mixed quickly but oddly calmly. The sound of the waves persisted outside, an endless tune that elevated our moment, feel even more cut off from the outside world. I put my head on his shoulder, realizing that you are both safe and afraid, disappeared like a curtain. I could hear his voice sounds like you're trying to avoid me, was silent but intensely urgent, remained mute since I wasn't sure how to react, was worried that if I spoke, I am aware that everything would fall apart. It's difficult to deal with everything that transpired. Liam hesitated to accept, his eyes brimming with suffering. Yet I can't act that way. Didn't occur, and I keep thinking about it. I turned to gaze at him about you, and in I could see all of my feelings in his eyes, attempting to bury uncertainty, desire, and Liam, our guilt is intertwined. We must go past this, I whispered quietly, attempting to maintain my tone of speech when his eyes wavered. Briefly before going back to mining, I'm hurt but determined, although I'm not sure how when everything keeps coming back to me. Every look and every moment in my head makes me recalling everything. I held onto the hose, tighter till I had white knuckles, had the same feeling each morning, and I could see that scene as clearly every night, as though it had just occurred. But I was aware that I needed to stop this family. all that George and I had constructed together. I inhaled deeply, my eyes burning as Liam was in danger of crying. If you concern for your father and this family. He remained silent, so we had to let him go, as if engaged in an internal conflict. At last, he turned and nodded, away, his shoulders trembling a little, as if he had recently lost something valuable. I observed him return to the house, abandoning me to stand by myself in the dying twilight, with a sense of emptiness and pain in each and every one of my, since I was aware that this was the proper thing to anything. Yet it felt like we were separated by a part of my heart had been ripped away by it, remained motionless in the yard until the sun disappeared beyond the horizon in the afternoon. The waves continued their steady smash like a reminder of the endurance and patience of time. But everything inside of me was continuing to churn like an unstoppable hurricane. I was aware that feeling had persisted. Each look and recollection of Liam was engraved in my memory. But I was also aware that if I kept living, if I didn't act, everything would be in this emotional limbo. Fall separated in the silent house that night. George was fast sleeping, so I sat sitting on the couch and gazing out the big window. The huge ocean of night stretched out in front of me, but my mind was confused and agitated. I determined it was time the following morning to finally put an end to the oppressive tension, and for everyone, I entered the kitchen where Liam quickly sat with his eyes lifted at seeing me. Maybe he had already was aware that this discussion was unavoidably. I sat opposite him, clasped hands to prevent them from shivering. Liam, I spoke softly but firmly at first. Cannot continue to do. Liam slowly nodded, but his eyes had a strong, I know it's sad, but how can we act like it's not? Never occurred. And I gave him a long-lasting chest pain that mixes we cannot change if we are resolute. What occurred? But we have a choice in how to proceed. You have your entire future ahead of you. Before you and I do, I have an obligation to this family, Liam. His shoulders were heavy as he lowered his head. I've never experienced something so intense previously, but I'll try. I contacted and touched his hand tenderly, one final time. Silently, goodbye, I think you can, and we sat in silence together, Will as well. But this time, the stillness was one of acceptance. I was certain that what we had wasn't an error. It was a component of the multifaceted feelings that people can't always control. But making the decision to let go didn't lessen its value, rather, it was evidence of our mutual respect and development. As well as for this, a week later, Liam's family received an offer from a significant New York-based business. His ideal internship, which he had always desired. Over dinner, he broke the news to George, was ecstatic, and gave him a hug while talking. I grinned, happy of his son's accomplishment. However, I experienced a combination of relief on the inside and sadness the day Liam went. I was standing at the door and embraced him tightly, saying, Take care of yourself, Liam," I muttered, nodded, his eyes soft yet resolute. "You too, Freya." He turned to leave, bringing all of his ambitions and recollections of my time spent observing his vehicle fade away along the seaside road with a sense of lighter but still empty, like if I had shut a whole section of our life story lacked a traditional happy ending. Although occasionally making the decision to leave is the only way to keep the lovely things I stepped on. Hearing back in the comfort of our own home. From the living room, George called to me. I walked in a familiar and reassuring voice and gave him a smile. Life went on, and I had decided to continue with the tranquility I understood that I had to defend myself,